They are the team behind the horror comedy entitled Some Guy Who Kills People. Director Jack Perez and screenwriter Ryan Levin join us in studio today.
Jack Perez is a 20-year veteran of the motion picture and television industry. He graduated with honors from New York University's Department of Film and Television. Early on, was hired by Sam Raimi and Universal Studios to direct the pilot for the popular television series Xena, Princess Warrior.
Following his work on Xena, Jack Perez has directed 9 feature films that include The Big Empty, La Cucaracha, Wild Things 2, and has written and directed MTV's Monster Island and Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus.
Ryan Levin has written on the TV shows I'm in the Band and Scrubs. He's consulted on South Park and sold animated pilots to 20th Century Fox and Comedy Central. Ryan Levin was also invited to pitch jokes and ideas to Sacha Baron Cohen,
cool.
a.k.a. Borat and Ali G, for Cohen's film Bruno.
He wrote and directed the short film The Fifth. Ryan Levin also wrote and directed the horror comedy short film Tour de Fright after winning financing from Boost Mobile's Create the Next Horror Villain contest. He is currently working on a screenplay based on the short film.
Some Guy Who Kills People is executive produced by John Landis and stars Kevin Corrigan, Barry Bostwick, and Karen Black.
Awesome film. It spotlights Ken Boyd, a depressed 34-year-old ice cream parlor employee, taunted by town locals after a recent mental institution release. Living at home with his condescending mother, played by Karen Black, Ken Boyd seeks revenge on those he deems responsible for his miserable life, adding in a quirky town sheriff, played by Barry Bostwick, and a reunion with Ken Boyd's preteen daughter, played by Ariel Gade. Please welcome to the Film Courage studio, Mr. Jack Perez and Mr. Ryan Levin. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Hello.
Thank you.
Great to have you here.
Thanks.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you. Congratulations to you guys on your accomplishments.
That's very cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very happy with that.
You know, and we're going right into it.
Let's do it.
We're going right into it.
Dive in.
You know, for this interview, you know, we're not going to hold back. We don't want you guys to hold back. And here's what I want to start with. You know, I can't tell you how many filmmakers we talk to that tell us that they don't want to be millionaires. You know, they don't need to be millionaires. Really, all they want is to be someone who can make the films they want to make and earn a living. And you know, and Jack, you're someone who has gone out and you've done it. What is the blueprint? You know, can you tell us candidly, what is it really going to take for a filmmaker who wants to make a living making films?
Good question. Well, you know, I think that was probably my philosophy going in, was I don't need to be rich and famous. I just want to be able to stay alive making movies. I mean, even if you reduce that, if you take out the rich and famous part and say, okay, maybe that'll make it easier, you're still going to run into trouble with making the movies that you want to make, that component. Because if you're looking for financing, if you're looking for somebody to pay for your movie, they don't necessarily pay for the movie you want to make. They usually pay for the movie they want to make, or what they deem to be a good investment. And I found in my life the movies that I'm really most proud of were those that weren't actually really seriously or heavily financed by Hollywood. They were truly independent movies. So what I've done is basically, after coming out of film school, I will do anything in the business as a director or even as an editor to stay alive, doing projects to to stay alive, but always in the back of my mind having those handful of movies that will sort of feed the soul in a way. Because if you just keep going making stuff that is not really your passion, you're going to die. You know, spiritually, you're going to die. And that's really where I was at the time that Some Guy Who Kills People came along.
Okay.
As successful as Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus was, that was not my passion. I did that movie, you know, as a last ditch. I had another movie that fell apart. This movie came along. I kind of made it as a gag, and it was sort of an accident that it kind of got so much attention. But when I look at that movie as just kind of a goof and really not representative of what I could do as a filmmaker. And I really felt sort of like, I'm not making any money, I'm not making the movies I want to make. It's been a long time, and like as fate would have it, this is when Ryan's script literally at the moment where I was like, you know what, the hell with this. I've been doing this 20 years, like, I'm not happy.
Interesting.
This is when the script came, and it really was sort of a life changer, for me in that way. I mean, it was, but I think you always have to have your eye on what's going to be personally fulfilling, and then do anything else you can and compartmentalize that, and make sure that you know where your art is and where the just survival bit is. And that's sort of, I don't know if that's an answer, but that's sort of the approach that I've always taken.
That's great. I want to go back to film school for a moment, because you mentioned that a lot in your prior interviews, and you talk about some of the egos there.
Yeah.
And you talked about, while in film school, you felt sort of neurotic, and you wanted to make sure that you knew every rule on set, so that you weren't this director sort of yelling down from an ivory tower to your gaffer.
Right.
And it's interesting, because sometimes we see things in others that we don't want to be, and that kind of prevents us from being that. So how did you see those traits in others at film school, and also for yourself?
Well, I just saw that, a lot of people posed. A lot of people like the idea of being a director because you get to be the boss, and everybody thinks you're God. Okay. But I saw very quickly the directors that I really admired out of films. I mean, the filmmakers that inspired me were ones that were essentially real masters of the medium, that understood all the aspects of filmmaking, if only to better harness or explain what you wanted, to get your, I hate the word vision, but to get your, the image in your head on screen. If you don't do everything yourself, then you've got to be able to communicate it. So if you understand the departments, then you can do that. If you just stand around, like I saw a lot of people going, I have this feel. I want this feeling. Can you give me my feel? Like basically just asking for this huge interpretation, but posing, I thought was just a bunch of bullshit, and I didn't think that was the way to be a filmmaker. So I didn't pretend to be a total filmmaker. I just decided I'm in film school. I'll learn everything about everything, and if I'm I remember I had to do a demonstration with a light meter. Like in one class, 16 mm class, I had a Sekonic light meter. This is how you take a light meter reading. And I remember being so nervous going up there in front of the class, and my hands were trembling, literally, and I probably still am sort of lame at getting a proper reading. I probably can, but I ended up shooting movies. I did sound, I mixed, I got it all down, so at least I knew what was required, so that when I would say, this is the next shot, I would not only know how to do it, but how to explain it, to know what was capable, and so I think you should learn the medium that you're working in. Otherwise, you're limiting your own means of expression. You're just hoping somebody guesses what you're trying to get across. So that's. But to answer your earlier question, I think that a lot of people just get into it because of ego and attitude, and maybe just wanting to be famous and be the guy. But I've heard stories of major directors, sitting around on a set reading comic books while everybody just sort of works until it's time to call out. And I could never believe that. I could never understand how someone could be so removed from the process. I just think it requires a real razor sort of sensibility to get the job done. Unless you just have acres of pounds of money and tons of time, which I've never had.
So then when you got out into sort of the quote-unquote real world, how did your expectations measure up? And also of those around you, sort of their hubris of, oh, well, I'm going to be discovered. What did you see happen as far as that film school sort of mindset then translate into real-world experience?
Well, I think that in general, that the film business will beat you silly very quickly. And so anybody who isn't like a junkie, and I mean this in the best sense, anybody who doesn't need to make movies is very quickly hit so hard unless they get so lucky. There's so many disappointments. There's so many things that don't happen. And that's just the odds of the thing, And I think that very quickly you see people go, I don't know if I want to be a filmmaker. Even if they went to film school and that's what they wanted to do, when you get it's like saying I want to be in a relationship and you get fucked over. So can I swear? I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
You get fucked over so badly. You get somebody like I'm never going to date I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to do this again.
Right.
So I think that you have to be somebody who can't function without making a movie in order to withstand the blows that come. And I saw a lot of people fall away. That's why it's like a Darwinian sort of weeding out process. And I think the only people that continue are the ones that say, you know what, as bad as it is, I can't seem to be, I am not fully realized as a person unless I'm making something, however long it takes. But the expectations were quickly shattered. Not immediately, but I thought, for example, I was just talking about this the other night with some friends, that if you put in X number of years of dues paying, start at the bottom, I started at the bottom, I did all kinds of, work my way up, did a lot of smaller shows, did bigger shows, I figured out won certain awards, certain festivals, did all the things that they told you was going to happen. After like almost 7 or 8 years of that, and I would say, okay, now the gate opens, and it's like, the girl, they sanction you, you get a little medal, and now life becomes easier, and you get easier financing, and you make more movies. And that was not the case at all. After winning film festivals, best film, and all that stuff, and having fans around town, it was still very hard to make movies, the ones that I wanted to make. What I did realize was that it works very much like the mob, in the sense that the person that gets to make movie after movie after movie is the filmmaker that's made so much money for a studio or a financial entity that they can't not. It's almost like being a made guy. Like, you can't kill this guy. This guy made so much money for us. We got to give him another movie. Whereas, because I had a friend who made a studio picture that made money, and even after it made money, he didn't get a job. It was a couple of years before he got a job. I was like, how the hell does that happen? You made a movie for the studio, it made money. Then I had another friend who made a movie for a studio, made a lot of money, and his movie came very quickly. So it wasn't even enough to be like successful. You have to be like ridiculously successful for that idea of now you're in the club.
Wow.
So for anybody else, including myself, it's always been like every time you start a movie, whatever it is, it's like starting over. And you have to be okay with that process, that there's not going to be this like, you can't rest on, there is no resting on something. It's sort of like, even Ryan and I are talking about just the other day, what about doing another movie right away, but even smaller budget, just so we can kind of keep it going and do something, because we had such a great experience making this movie. Why don't we just do something? And the idea that it was going to be tiny, even smaller, got me more excited, because the possibility of making it became more of an actuality. As opposed to, let's go shop this thing around town and get a deal and blah, 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 maybe 5 years later, maybe. That's just, again, that's sort of like a slow death. I would rather go out and make something for $2,000 and know we're going to make it this year. That all of a sudden like gives me hope, and I think that a filmmaker lives on that I'm actually going to get on set and make something, as opposed to maybe down the road,
Absolutely.
Wow. Great stuff.
Ryan, what made you go after the production assistant job on Scrubs back in 2003, and how do you then go from being a PA to having a writing credit for the same hit TV show?
I'm originally from LA, and I moved when I was moved to college in Philadelphia and then to New York. And it took me a while in New York to figure out what I wanted to do, but after almost 5 years, I started writing spec TV shows, not knowing anything about the business, just writing them for fun. And I quickly realized it was the most fun I had ever had. Was just writing these episodes of existing shows, and I quickly realized, all right, this is the most specific direction I've had in my career. I don't want to leave New York, but it looks like I'm going to have to if I want to enter into the TV world. So I decided, all right, I'm going to pursue a TV writing career. But being from here and not having anybody in my family in the business or anything, I was, I might as well have been from Wisconsin or something, and there were no direct ins or anything. But before I left New York, I just I ended up speaking to a lot of people through, various connections, and found out, all right, one way to get in is just to take that, that shovel the shit job and get your foot in the door and just be there at all the time, getting people coffee and everything. So I came out here and found getting a PA job on a TV show was like the hardest thing in the world. Like everybody in the city was willing to do exactly what. Yeah, I'm like, oh, who's willing to do that for no money? Yeah. Turns out everybody. So I spent months, well, I guess, yeah. I mean, I came here a couple months before what they call TV staffing season, when they would be hiring these PAs, and I just blanketed the town with resumes, just saying, like, I will do anything on your show for any amount of money, and for every shows I'd never even heard of. At the time, Scrubs happened to be my favorite show, and I sent one in and found out I knew somebody who knew somebody, got an interview there, and got this PA job, which, because of our awesome production coordinator, literally amounted to shoveling shit. In talking to I was very careful not to be pushy about my real aspirations. Everybody knows nobody's aspirations are to be a PA. Everybody's there for one reason or another, to be a producer, to be a writer, director, whatever. But I knew well enough to just kind of hang back and, do my time. But in talking to some of the higher level people, just who were nice enough to just chat with me, I made my interest in writing clear, and middle of the year got, bumped up to writer's PA. So all of a sudden, instead of getting coffee for, actors, I was getting it for the writers, which to me was like a huge promotion, because I was now at least surrounded by the people I wanted to, learn from. And so from there, I went from writer's PA, and I was there for 3 years total, and moved up to writer's assistant, which basically put me in the room with the writers and got me the chance to just, take notes and just see how a writer's room worked, and just to learn from this amazing group of writers on this, extremely well-written, well-respected show. Did that for 2 years, and in my third year there, the showrunner, had asked to see some of my own writing, which I was doing on the side, and was very supportive and became a fan of mine and offered me the chance to write an episode. Unfortunately, I knew from the beginning that on some shows, writers' assistants can get bumped up to full-time writers. I knew from the beginning that this particular showrunner didn't have that policy. As a matter of fact, his policy was no writer assistant will ever become a staff writer on my show, and he had his reasons for that, which I hate, but I respect. And so I knew that the best I could get out of it would be a script, but at least that would do something. Mm-hmm. And then from there, that opened the door to getting an agent, and then basically pursuing TV jobs from TV staffing jobs from there on out. So
yeah, and kudos to you to keep going, because I believe you mentioned in another interview that when you were kind of at a crossroads in your life, you kind of said, well, I don't want to be that guy at the Starbucks with the MacBook, right, typing it, and it just seems so hard to make it. And we've all seen them, right, there during the day.
I'm still that guy.
Okay. Right. But and we all are, in a sense, and it does seem daunting, and like, how's anybody going to rise above this whole level right here? Jack, I wanted to go back to something just real quickly that you said about the spiritual death that you were feeling, and anybody who's ever gone without money knows that sometimes you most certainly have to take some job to pay the bills, and that it can't all be about some artistic vision. So when you do have a project, and you don't have to name which one, but when you do have a project that your heart's not in it, how do you keep going? How does the inertia of that, this is not my thing, not beat you down, and you can still kind of keep showing up every day?
Well, it's the money.
Okay.
But it's not usually. But I should say, I should be clear that it's not a lot of money, but it's money, sure. And you're being paid to do. If you studied film in school, or if you just learned it however you learned it, you're being paid to do something, that you love to do, even if it's not the project that is going to, be a renaissance or something in your own person, but it's still you're being paid to do the work. And so there's a joy in filmmaking. There's a joy in creating images for me and putting shots together and just working, with the clay or whatever you want to call it. That is, and if you're getting paid for it, even if it's not a ton of money, is, I think, reward enough. And so I think the inspiration comes from that fact. Not even the money first, but the idea that you're working, you get to work. You get to work. I mean, I've always looked at filmmaking as being one of those things. Like, there's plenty of metaphors for it, but it's like if you're a singular artist, if you're a poet, you have an inspiration, you write it down. If you're a painter, if you're lucky enough to have enough money for a canvas, you open your paint box and you paint, and you get at. There's a one-to-one relationship between this is what I feel. I'm a songwriter. Pick up my guitar, I play. In the middle of the night, I got this inspiration. If you're a filmmaker and you get an inspiration, it's like, unless you are self-financed, which very few of us are, it's like somebody's locked up your box of paints, and you spend a zillion years, or however long it's going to take, getting the frickin' key to unlock the goddamn paint box so you can paint. So when they finally unlock it, even if it's not, the ideal project, it's still like, thank you, God, thank you. I finally get to paint, and so that's the... I am not the first one to say that, but Orson Welles had said this thing late in his career, which was filmmaking is 90% hustling and 10% filmmaking. And then he said, then that's no way to spend a life, which was a very kind of bitter way of looking at it, because you'd think Orson Welles would have been, people would have been falling down to give him projects, and he made very few movies, but spent all his time hustling, Orson Welles. So we're all hustlers, but I don't think very few of us enjoy that. You're hustling out of necessity so that somebody will open the paint box so you get to do what you want to do. So when, even if it's not the ideal project, it's still film, which is, an honor to work, it's an honor to be making a film, whatever it is, So,
Jack, the trailer to Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus had over 1 million hits on MTV.com, another 1 million hits on YouTube. It was featured on the front page of Yahoo. It's reached a mass audience, and yet at the same time, there's the other side of it, where on Rotten Tomatoes, it had a 16% rating.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's
not bad.
It had a 2.7 rating on IMDb. I mean, were you able to do all you wanted to do with the film, and do you view it as a success?
No. Well, look, this is a real, to me, the fact that some guy who kills people followed Mega Shark was, I think, if you only looked at those two movies, that was a very big learning experience, personal learning experience for me, because I made Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus. Look, whatever I make, again, because it's so rare that you get to make a movie, any movie, I break my back trying to make it. But the parameters of Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus, who is producing it, how they make movies, the elements I was handed, the time I was handed, and I knew it was only ever going to be this stupid little piece of shit. That's all. I knew it was going to be that. My job was to make it, to genuinely polish the turd. Like, to make something. My goal with that thing was that at least what I want people to walk away with from that movie is that they would know that I know that it's ridiculous. Like, I want them to know that I know this is a shitty little movie, but at least it's kind of stupid and fun, and you can get high and watch it, or whatever it is. I did. It wasn't. It was the least thing in my filmography. The irony is that the movies that I had done previously, which I considered, real representations of my work as a filmmaker, didn't make the same kind of dent as this stupid little thing. Now, I know some people really like it. I know they like it because they get the camp aspect, which is the only thing I was able to put over. But in terms of being able to finesse the movie the way I would do it, typically, like I did with, let me put it this way. Some Guy Who Kills People, Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus, virtually the same budget, in the same budget range. Some Guy Who Kills People was the exact opposite in terms of being able to really control what the movie was going to be. Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus was like shooting something and then like throwing it into a blender and hoping, the way that process worked, it's a miracle that it's even coherent, that thing. There are things in that movie where they would actually, in order to get me to running time, I've said this before, like, this is the degree of insanity. Like a writer will labor over whether this should be an and or an or, like all night, should it be an and or an or, right? Editing is like that. You decide, Jesus, 2 frames less or more makes the difference. in this case, Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus, the producers needed the movie to be a certain length of time. They needed it to be, I think the movie came in at 93 minutes. They needed it to be like 97 minutes for some release in Asia or something. So they went in and they added pauses. Like, it's almost like double spacing a script. They just went in and added pauses. Like, instead of like adding shots of maybe the Mega Shark and the fucking Giant Octopus killing each other some more, but people get the goddamn name of the movie, they just went and added pauses. So they made every scene which was already compromised even worse. As my wife says, it turned a bad scene into a scene out of a porno movie. You know what I mean? It would be like, typically, like, this is the example. Someone would go, look, there's the octopus. And typically it's like, look, there's the octopus, you cut, right? And it'd be like, look, there's the octopus. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000. And the reaction from the producers would be like, you know what? It's 97 minutes. We did our job, So the opposite of working with Ryan on this, where we really were like every moment that we could make better, we could, and that's what's rewarding. And so the irony that Mega Shark vs. Giant Octopus has the attention, that this shows me the topsy-turvydom of the business. Like, it's the least thing I've ever made, and yet it's the thing that everybody knows. So, like, I can't put that, it can't, remedy that in my brain. It's sort of like, okay, listen, you just entered Bizarro World, and that's what it is, and too bad, eat it. That's the way it works, it'll happen that way. So I just want to point out the last thing, it's like I wanted Mega Shark, I wanted people to know that I was goofing on Ed Wood, that I wasn't Ed Wood, and thank God we made Some Guy Who Kills People, because at least people, now I can say, look, see, I'm not that guy, even if you thought I was Ed Wood. I'm not actually Ed Wood. Hopefully, people will say.
And we removed all pauses from Some Guy Who Kills People, which is why it's 12 minutes long. So it was a learning experience.
Right. I'm loving it. Thank you for that, Jack.
We are in studio with filmmakers Jack Perez and Ryan Levin of Some Guy Who Kills People, which is currently screening in film festivals all around the world. Please visit the website at someguyWhoKillsPeople.com. So, Ryan, after 2 years of trying to raise money for Some Guy Who Kills People, and I believe in the process of which you attached John Landis to the film only to lose him right before you were about to secure financing.
Correct.
So you lose Landis and as the director and with the financing. So why didn't you just quit at this point?
There were about 2 weeks where I did. It had been such a long process up to that point to get the financing, that to have it sort of dangling in front of us and then snatched away at the last second, that was kind of the final blow. And it took me a couple weeks to just kind of step away and process it all and decide what to do. Was this just a project that just wasn't meant to happen? Do I just kill it here and move on? And initially my initial reaction was, it's dead. We were trying to do this at the worst, trying to raise money at the worst possible time economically, and indie film, you're not going to convince anybody that indie film is the way to make money. But at the end of the 2 weeks, I guess I just sort of got some sort of resurgence and said, well, let's just find out what the minimum amount of money we can make this movie for is. Let's hire somebody. Let's hire a really, great line producer to go through it and give us a budget of what's the minimum amount of money we can make this movie for, and just forget name actors, forget big name directors, and having tons of extra time, and let's just shoestring, what can we do this for? And it's still a lot of money, not relative to other films, but just absolutely it's a lot of money. So but I just went out sort of hat in hand to friends and relatives and just kind of cobbled it together over a few months, and then everything just kind of took off from there. I mean, as soon as we had the money that we needed, plus what we thought was a little bit more as a buffer, everything just quickly took off in terms of casting, in terms of hiring Jack as a director, in terms of getting the crew together, and then it just became one big blur of, all right, let's I guess we're making this movie. So I mean, there were so many ups and downs. I'm always sort of going back and thinking, okay, well, even now, as you know, we're in the middle of promoting the film. Is this the hardest part? Trying to sell the film? Was writing the film the hardest part? Was making the film the hardest part? Was editing the film the hardest part? Was raising the money? I don't know the answer. They're all extremely difficult. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Everybody said, okay, you've made your movie. Now comes the hard part. And I would always say, yeah, whatever. Like, it's got to be easier than what I've been through. But yeah, selling it's no piece of cake either. Yeah, it was just a matter of like needing a little bit of time to go, okay, where do I stand on this? Needing a couple weeks off and then saying, all right, let's just give it another shot.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm wondering what that component is, because Jack, you talked about it too, that you have to really love this or else you're just it's survival of the fittest. And so you have those 2 weeks where you're like eating Cheetos in front of the TV and feeling sorry for yourself. And then where's that sort of rocky moment? Where's that resurgence come from? Because so many people would give up and then beat themselves up for it. So you say there's been a ton of ups and downs. Where do you go when that down hits? How do you bring yourself up?
I think part of it is it's part of its stubbornness, part of it's a competitive drive,
okay,
part of its ambition. Maybe maybe all those together account for 1%. The other 99% is fear of failure and just saying, I failed to make this happen. I set out for a goal and I failed to achieve it. That can't happen. So let's make the movie somehow. And plus, I the script. I had spent so much time on the script and getting the script to a place that I was, I loved the script when it was a piece of crap, like in the early drafts, and I only came to love it more as I would get good feedback from people, and it started to take on more, resemble more of its current shape. And that to me was like, I can't. Yes, most scripts end up not being shot, and I could have just said, all right, this will fall into that category, and you can fill a landfill with those scripts. I just kind of refused to let this be one of those, because I wanted to see it made. I just wanted to see it made. Like, I was tired of seeing it on my computer screen. I wanted to see the film get shot, and I wanted to see what, as stupid as it sounds, I wanted to see what played out in my head become a reality somehow, some way, with some actors under somebody's direction.
Let's talk about the script, and let's talk about one of the highlights here, Ryan. What was going through your mind, when you did get into the hands of John Landis? He reads it, and then it's the next day.
Yeah.
He says, all right, I want to have lunch with you.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, going through that experience?
That was completely surreal, especially with everything that had led up to it, which was having, we had initially we had tried to go about raising the money by attaching name actors, and we got some quote-unquote name actors to say they'd be willing to do it, but they weren't of the quality or caliber, not quality acting-wise, but just they weren't on the list of people that guarantee you funding or financing. So by the time we got back to them and said, we still don't have anything. They were like, either, who are you? I don't remember attaching my name to your project. Or, okay, well, good luck with it. I'm going on to my other project. And then when we first, decided to switch tacks and say, all right, let's try going with the director, it was just completely surreal to say, all right, first choice, John Landis, send it to him. Next day, let's have lunch. Next day, sitting with John Landis, having lunch. And, he's made some of my favorite movies. If I had to make a top 10 list, I would say at least 4 of them would be Landis films. Mm-hmm. It was just a completely surreal experience. And then getting the chance to work with him on the script for a few days over the next couple of weeks, and getting his thoughts, his notes, and being able to, it was just so cool to get notes from him and then go home and saying, I'm going to rewrite this based on John Landis's notes. It was just, as opposed to I'm rewriting this based off my dad's notes. It was just invigorating. So I'd go back to him and be like, so here you go. Here, did you like it? Do you like it? Do you like it? Is it better? And you get, yeah, much better. It's much better. Oh my God, it's much better. This is amazing. And then, so we did that a few times, and it was exhilarating, and then crushing when he backed out, and I was like, oh yeah, this feeling. Okay, good. Yeah, I remember this one. Eventually we ended up. I ended up asking him, hey, look, to be honest, you helped me with the script, A, and B, having your name attached can help us with this movie. Would you be willing to put your name on as executive producer? And as a smart businessman, he said, sure, for a cut of the profits. And I said, sure, there's not going to be any profits. Yeah, sure, yeah. You want 97 points? You got him. No, but he doesn't have 97 points. I hope not. Check with my lawyer. But he agreed to do it, and it's funny because he was shooting in Birkenhead in the UK, and we sent him a rough draft of the cut to get notes on, and he called me and he left me this message, which I still have, which is basically I watched the cut. He's like, I cannot believe how good this movie is. To be honest, I expected, when you told me what budget you were now making this movie at, and no offense to Jack, with a director that I've never heard of, but I expected this to be awful. He's like, you have a damn good picture here. And he gave us a ton of notes, which we incorporated, which made it that much better. And ever since then, he's been extremely supportive of the film, and in terms of the film festivals, in terms of just, talking it up whenever he can. So, yeah, he continues to be an asset, a supporter. Maybe one day he and I will work together in some capacity. But he's a genuinely great guy who I feel like there's a side of him that really likes being kind of playing that mentor role and helping young filmmakers or screenwriters sort of either get better or get their picture made or whatever it is. But I think that answers the question. Yeah,
absolutely.
The short answer is it was surreal. Yeah. and then I just gave you the long answer.
No, thank you.
And then, Jack, we have a quote that we found from you that we'd like to talk about. You say, if you make a slip in casting, it'll haunt you forever, so cast carefully. The look of an actor is way less important than what's behind their eyes.
Yeah, I still believe that. I think that people sometimes get caught up in the idea that they visualize the character in their mind physically. And when you go into auditions, you're looking for that sort of match. And I think that if you have a choice between two actors, one who maybe he's not even the same ethnicity. And that came up recently. A film student of mine asked me, I've got this character, found this great actor, but she's the mom I like for the movie is white, and the little girl is East Indian. But I never imagined. She said, what do I do? I said, well, look, if these are really the two best actors that you have, then you find a way to, you make an adjustment, either in the script or whatever, because the acting, the emotional quality of an actor, how truthful they are, how much they really are able to communicate that character is way more important than any physicality. Nobody, physical look. Like even in the case of Some Guy Who Kills People, Lucy Davis from The Office, the original BBC Office and Shaun of the Dead, came in to read for the part of Kevin Corrigan's love interest, which I was like, cast her, like this. She came into audition, great, I was a fan, but she's a Brit, and I can't tell you how many people, even on Xena Warrior Princess, when we, they would like have all these Kiwi actors speak with American accents because they were afraid of the accent. I was like, Lucy's natural accent was charming and part of her personality. I didn't want her to have to do an American accent, and Ryan and I talked about it, and thankfully Ryan was like, yeah, I'll just write a line where we explain she's in this small town because she followed some guy.
That's great.
And that's who she is, and boom, it's over. And now you got the best actor in there. And that was really the case with Some Guy Who Kills People, which is rare, which is that we just having to get the best actors for these parts. This is completely lucked out, But don't ever cast for somebody that really triggers that thing inside of you that goes, yeah, this is a real person, and forget the physicality. That's what comes across.
Jack, you kind of touched on it already, that you had to sort of fight to direct this movie. How important was this movie overall to you, and what do you think you did to earn the job, to earn this directing job?
I just, just really quickly, what I did was I knew I needed to make the movie, otherwise I was going to die. I was going to die, and I was never going to want to make another movie. I was like at that point where I was just like, was hating the whole experience of it. I was very sad. And so I knew I needed the movie to get back, And so I just went to Ryan and told him, I just opened my heart and said, I believe in this thing. I know what this movie is, and I want to serve this script. And I wasn't interested in changing the script or anything. I just told him I would be the guy. I get you. I get this. I want to realize this. Here's some quick storyboards that I had, some ideas. I sketched them out. Really, the ideas came very quickly. Showed it to him, and I was just honest that I could do this, and I didn't have to bullshit because I knew it as I clicked with the material, and that was a lucky break. And fortunately, Ryan, took a chance and said, "Okay, I know you made this stupid Mega Shark movie, but for some reason you seem to like this, and can do it." I said, "Believe," and that's how I got it. Just earnest. Be earnest is the best hustle, I guess.
Well, fortunately, I went back and watched other films of yours too.
Thank you. I think I made him. I said, please watch anything else.
Yes.
So,
just real quick as we wrap up here, how do you handle the unknown of being in this business in between jobs? How do you have that faith that another one's going to come up, and that's going to be one that's going to be something you want to do, so you don't go through that spiritual death and that sort of depression or whatever it is? How do you keep that momentum going?
Well, you do go through the depression.
Okay. Just accept it.
Yeah, so that's
St.
step
John's
one.
Wort comes out.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Or something more powerful. But legal.
Okay.
I guess it goes back to something Jack said, which is, as a writer, what I can do is I can just keep writing. And if I had to sort of rely, like an actor has to rely on somebody granting them the part, that would be more soul-crushing than sort of that unknown would be more soul-crushing than, I don't have a job, I need a job, let's wait for the phone to ring. And as hard as it is to just, I find writing extremely difficult. I'm a very slow writer. Things don't just pop into my head, as fleshed out as some other people of whom I'm quite jealous, or, and can crank things out much faster. So it takes me a lot of time, but at the same time, I know that my way out of this hole, or my way to answer the question of will I get another job, I can increase the chances by sitting down and writing something, whether it's a TV pilot or a screenplay or even a short film, whatever I happen to be inspired to write at that particular moment. That gives me some sense of control. Like, I can write something, I can get it to people that will get it out there, and chances are it won't sell or land me a job, but the next one will, or the next one will. And yeah, it's just, go back to just the saying of, like, if you're a writer, you have to write. And that's, to me, it's somewhat of an obsession. Like, I'm obsessed with writing, so I have to be doing it. So when I'm not employed, I'm just writing, and that's somehow in some way moving me closer to the next job. And as soon as I get that next job, then my question becomes, okay, well, even while I'm having that job, what's the next job? It's like, no, try to stay in the present, and then that's a whole other challenge. But yeah, I mean, you go, the ups and downs are inevitable, the rejection's inevitable, but at least as a writer, you can do something about it, which is just right.
Anything to add?
No, I think that's really good. I think that's, and also watching stuff that inspires you, watching really good movies, not just watching the crap. I mean, we're in a pretty low ebb here. It's like sort of the nadir of cinema. I mean, there's stuff, but there's a lot of the quote-unquote new releases are not the things that are really going to inspire you to go. So what I do is I go back to a lot of old movies. I just watch the movies that inspired me. I look for things that are complex, not in an intellectual way, but just that have a lot going on in terms of the filmmaking, in terms of the choices, in terms of how much risk, in terms of what can really be done. Look at those movies that really made you want to be a filmmaker, and it reminds you, there is art here and there is poetry here, even in any genre, and it reminds you, I want to be a part of that. So I think watch good stuff, and you'll be reminded why you got into it in the first place.
We've been speaking with director Jack Perez and screenwriter Ryan Levin of the horror comedy Some Guy Who Kills People. Great film. Go out and watch it. Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. For more on Jack and Ryan, please visit someguyWhoKillsPeople.com. You can find them on Facebook /SomeGuyWhoKillsPeople, on Twitter, Some Guy Who Kills, as well as IMDb. Thank you, Jack and Ryan, for being here with us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, it was really a lot of fun.
And thank you for joining us on yet another edition of Film Courage. We look forward to being here with you next Sunday at noon on latalkradio.com, and we'll be joined by documentary filmmaker Doug Block. For more on Doug Block, please visit his amazing site, d-word.com, which is a worldwide community site for documentary filmmakers, and also DougBlockWeddings.com. Yeah, and before we leave, big shout out to you, Ronan. Thank you, and thank you for keeping us on pace. We know we ran a little long, but we would be lost without you, Ronan. And until next Sunday, have a great week.